Welcome to the Possibility Hub video series. I'm Carol Talbot, the creator and founder of the Possibility Hub, an advocate for awakening, encouragement, and creating opportunities for an expansion of awareness and consciousness. In this episode, I'm in conversation with Matthew Ryan, the developer of an energetic healing modality called gamma wave healing, and we're talking about what happened to the Washington Monument and the current situation in Washington and beyond. Hello again, Matthew. And I know when we were just speaking, just before we sort of hit the record button, we were saying, definitely interesting energies going around at the moment. All over the place, which actually links to something that happened not so long ago, earlier this week, actually, in Washington, that you feel there's more to it than meets the eye. So let's kick into that straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me on the show. I really enjoy these discussions, and especially when we get into topics like this. This is super interesting. So what you're referring to is earlier in the week, I believe it was on Sunday or maybe Monday, I think it was maybe Sunday, that there evidently was some weather activity in Washington, D.C. and a photographer, at least from the image or the video that I've seen, a photographer was on the mall in Washington, D.C. looking at the Washington Monument, and lightning struck the top of the Washington Monument. And people would say, okay, well, it's an extremely tall structure. It's the tallest structure, anywhere in the entire area.
It's the tallest obelisk in the world, actually.
The tallest obelisk in the world. And it is exactly above the ground. It is 555 feet tall. And then the foundation that goes under the ground is 111 feet deep. So the entire height from the bottom of the foundation to the top is 666 feet tall. So there's, this is a very, very interesting symbol, that has been placed into this world. And it was placed on ley lines, it's placed on a grid. If people aren't familiar with Washington, D.C., there's extreme levels of esoteric knowledge that are applied in the layout of the city. I would argue that it's an inversion of ancient wisdom, that this control structure that redesigned after the corporatization of the United States of America and the destruction of the Republic after the Civil War, that these structures were laid out on purpose in order to create energetic inversions, which could be used to manipulate the world, manipulate reality, manipulate consciousness. And so we have the Washington Monument being struck by lightning, and I really am pretty sure that this is not just some random weather phenomenon, because as we look over the last several months, and even over the last couple of years, going across the world, there are these structures that are symbolically very important to this cabal control structure. And many of these buildings, many of these structures have been struck by lightning, with people videotaping or, getting photos, like St. Peter's at the Vatican, and the Shard in London. And synchronistically, I think it was the first time that I was flying to South Africa. I was on board the plane, and this storm came into London, and as the plane was like being cleared then to take off, like you could see lightning in the distance beginning, like towards the city. We took off, and I didn't know anything about this, but when I found out, when I landed in Johannesburg, I found out that lightning, literally my airplane was the last, like I had a friend check the flight tracker, and my airplane was the last airplane allowed to leave London. And right after it took off, lightning struck the Shard, which is this tall helical, like glass and steel structure that is very much a cabal symbol. And so what I see that as is maybe we're looking at either higher levels of energetic dimensional expression that are focusing energy in kind of a more natural way, or perhaps we're also seeing evidence of technology being applied that is neutralizing different energetic expressions out of these structures.
Exactly. I was going to say, we're all well aware of cloud seeding and things like that. So, it's highly plausible that storms can be and are created. Also, as I said, with the Washington Monument, it's an obelisk. And obelisks go back to, ancient Egypt. Their structure, traditionally, I think they were meant to be one piece of stone. So to create such a tall structure in itself is very unusual. And also from Egypt, I believe that it's linked to death and the death process. Or, as you say, could be linked with harnessing energy. And anything of like an obelisk or pyramid is to do with preservation, cultivation, has a very unique energetic form as well.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. These coming out of the ancient world, it's very clear that the ancient civilizations, especially the Egyptians, who we call the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, these ancient civilizations understood the use of and the generation of energy in many different ways, and these obelisks were absolutely integral parts of that kind of energetic grid that was laid out through Egypt, but you see them all over. I mean, there are pyramids, I believe, in the Sudan. There were pyramids and obelisks, like very truncated pyramids. Ethiopia, the largest obelisks on Earth are actually from Ethiopia, and as you said, they were all carved out of single pieces of bedrock, like harvested out of the bedrock, and these things weigh over 500 tons, and in some cases, this one in Ethiopia, I believe it's over 1,000 tons, but it was cracked like in situ, and so they couldn't they couldn't utilize it. So they're spread all over the world. And why do they also show up in these like really intriguing power places? Like, why is there a gigantic obelisk in front of St. Peter's at the Vatican? Why is at the Place de la Concorde in Paris, or right outside of the Met in New York City, or in in London, in Trafalgar Square, there's like an obelisk shaped structure. And as I discovered after the very first time I taught a workshop in Sweden, I was talking about the why is there an obelisk in front of the Vatican during my workshop. And I had a friend take me around old Stockholm, and she said, let's go to the palace. We'll look at the royal palace. And we turned the corner around the royal palace, and there standing is an obelisk in front of the Swedish royal palace. And I just started laughing, because it says it's like dedicated to the war veterans of something, whatever it is. And I'm going, no, these are indicators that the people that have been in charge of this planet, or have taken charge of this planet for the last several thousand years, they understand these principles of energetics. They understand the symbolism as well. So, there's the obelisk situation and the Washington Monument being struck by lightning, it does not seem like an accident to me.
No, and especially when you say 555 feet, 111 feet underneath, so making it 666, again, sends off alarm bells. Also, I believe the Washington obelisk was built at the end of the 1800s. And when you look at some of these structures, how was it built? And you were saying, some of the palaces, you look at some of the so-called, what we know as cathedrals, churches, castles for royalty. And if I go back to when I was a child, we often had au pairs, and my mother used to take myself and the au pairs. We often went up to London to see all, St. Paul's Cathedral, all these amazing places, or around, when we were out traveling. And I never asked who really built these, because if you look back hundreds of years and you see, in history books, the architecture, or the main body of people living in sort of mud huts and very lowly accommodations, so to speak. And then you see this magnificent architecture and the intricate details when there were no power tools, and the accuracy, the accuracy of the angles with no power tools. I don't think the first power tool came in from Bosch actually till the early 1900s. And also in these cathedrals and churches, and I call them cathedrals and churches, yet I don't think they were. You see these magnetrons, which again links to the view, were they energy generators? And the other thing that I discovered was that most castles where royalty live were not built actually for anybody to live in, because there were no fireplaces or anything to keep them warm. Yet you've got their servants living in, small houses or huts outside, and all of those had a fireplace or a fire pit, yet none existed originally in any of the castles. So were they actually built to be lived in? And were many of these buildings then turned into so-called religious places? And it makes you wonder about, was religion created? And what I've read is that these magnetrons, which were in these buildings, were filled in with glass, maybe stained glass windows. And as I said, we go in and see these amazing domes. Most of them, whichever religion you go to, most of the temples, churches, places of worship, they have a dome. And they also have something on the top, which could be a cross or something in copper, which then again makes you think, were these energy generators? And then I go to Paris again, where you've got the Arc de Triomphe, which is an arc, obviously, like a magnet. And then I was just talking about the magnetrons. So, is there something there, that there was something going on where our free energy was taken away from a previous culture? And that here we were plonked and told, no, these are churches, you need to go and pray in here, and you need to pay for power, you need to pay for energy. And that also makes me think, we pay for energy to light up our houses, and yet everything is energy. Everything is energy. Energy is the building blocks of all matter. And, consciousness is energy. Energy is consciousness. So are we paying for our consciousness?
Well, I think you bring up a lot of different points there that are really interesting and worth a lot of consideration. And I honestly feel like we're going to be learning a lot about this history that has been manipulated and hidden from us. Many, like talking about the magnetrons and speaking about how the design of these structures may have been intended, to do something like generate energy. And I think that that's absolutely clear, especially in the case of these ancient structures. But even then, looking at things like the Chartres Cathedral and, other structures like that clearly are incorporating elements of sacred geometry and design. And, if you look through the lens of frequency, resonance generation, and, why are all of the churches in the Western world pretty much focused with a steeple on top? And as you said, a dome or a spire on top of the dome. And I think it's very clear that these are used for energy generation in some way. Maybe yes, maybe things have been repurposed. Maybe we've been lied to around a lot of things. I mean, I think I know that we have, but maybe not a maybe, but and then looking around the ancient world, and you see like some of the work of like Carl Monk that made the code, and talking about the harmonic frequencies of situations, like where these locations were actually physically situated on the earth, and how they're in these harmonic like wavelengths that they were generating energy. You know, you look at like Teotihuacan outside of Mexico City, and I mean, I've been there, and when I'm walking down that, you know, the Avenue of the Dead, and it's very clear that on either side, all of these stacked pyramids, and they're not very big, but they're these stepped pyramids on either side. They very clearly are, there's like energy moving between the entire, you know, site location and then the massive pyramids, you know. So this is knowledge that was held all around the world, you know. And when you're talking about the accuracy of the machining and the level of detail that was achieved, and you know, these things, I think what we're looking at is that there also is esoteric knowledge that has been withheld from us, perhaps translated down, you know, through the Western world from like the Templars, when they acquired information and maybe technology when they were in the Crusades in the Holy Land, and then that information perhaps translated to the Masons, so that if they were building contemporary structures, it was incorporating this ancient knowledge. But then, like, you see other things though as well, about like in ancient Egypt, when you're talking about accuracies, right? That you know, Christopher Dunn has written some wonderful books. You know, he's an engineer, you know, working in industrial processes for 30 years, and he looked at the evidence of technology in ancient Egypt. And just on the statue of Ramses, there's this very famous statue of Ramses II, and they've used computer analysis to measure that it is completely perfectly symmetrical. It's completely symmetrical. This statue of Ramses, carved out of like red granite or something, and it is not possible. This is not possible to have been
Yes.
done by human hands, because we are incapable of achieving that level of precision on a symmetrical, like live living rock. And there are reams and reams and reams of evidence of advanced technology being used to construct these things, and yet we're told that the Egyptians didn't even understand the wheel. I mean, it's like, it's literally incomprehensibly stupid, the story that has been told to us in order to cover up what I believe is our real history and our real heritage.
And it's drummed into us again and again and again, to the point where we don't question it. And this is the reason I said, you know, when I've been sightseeing in different parts of the world, and I'm fairly well traveled, and you just do not ask these questions. You go with your camera and it's like, look at me, look at me. And you'd never ask the obvious question of how come it's here and what was its real purpose.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been able to do some traveling in recent years to go to these sites as well. And I mean, I'd been waiting 20 years to go to Peru. Like, ever since I really learned about Peru, I really had waited. And a few years ago, I did a dieta in the jungle. And then after the dieta, I traveled through the Sacred Valley. And I tell you, like, going in, I got goosebumps right now remembering this, like going to Sacsayhuaman and looking at these stones that literally weigh like 125 tons, and they are shaped with like 13 facets, and they fit together as a jigsaw puzzle.
Totally.
And you know, I mean, this, there could be an atomic weapon detonated near Cuzco, and this structure would absolutely withstand it. This thing is there permanently. And it blows your mind because of the scale of it. And like, we understand that, like, what it takes to move that kind of a stone. And you have stonemasons that look at all of this work, and they're telling us that at the state of the art of modern technology, we are hard pressed to replicate these things that allegedly were made by little dudes in bowler hats that are like on little reed boats in Lake Titicaca, that they pulled off Sacsayhuaman. You know, like, the stories are, it's just, you know, for when I was there, I was being told that it was over 17,000 years old, and that this is evidence of the ancient Lemurian civilization. Any attempt to carbon date material around it, to me, is ludicrous, because it was created in a 5D frequency. So therefore, like, where it came into manifestation isn't expressing in the same way. And so, yeah, there's just so much for us to learn and explore right now, and I'm excited about this kind of
Yeah,
conversation.
to me, those obelisks, the pyramids. I mean, I know there's even pyramids, so to speak, in discovered in Antarctica. That
Oh
there
yeah.
seems to be a network, that they are sort of generators or communication devices, or like you say, they're utilized in some way. So would it
Yeah.
be pertinent, since you are connected with beings from Alpha Centauri, and that you can bring in another form of intelligence, would it be pertinent to sort of tap into that now and see if we get some extra information?
Yeah, sure. Like I think we had discussed looking a little bit at this event like around the Washington Monument specifically.
Yes,
So yeah, so what I'm seeing around that for sure. It's an interesting thing as there's a multidimensional expression that is occurring, and at the physical level, at the 3D level, at the level at which like the deepest, densest distortions are that are being cleared. We see a manifestation of a lightning strike, that is grounding. But what is going on these other levels of energy, there are fields of energy that have been intentionally cultivated, through the construction of the Washington Monument, through the construction of all of these other buildings in the city. And in fact, the building code, requires certain things to be built in certain ways, which is ancient Greek or Roman style, which is Atlantean. And so we're working with levels of frequency. What happened in that event, that there was a clearing that was occurring on multiple levels of frequency, multiple levels of density. So those that that are more attuned into these ways, when we see this image, it generates an awakening. It's like a generating a ping on the sonar, that pops into our awareness, and it's unifying people's consciousness towards an understanding that this control structure, this frequency field, which is called the system of control, has been eradicated around our world. And so that expression is going to play itself through multiple levels. The elementals are also involved in this situation through the manifestation, through a weather system, forcing lightning. So there, that is the main takeaway, is that this is a symbolic event, but it's also very much an event of a neutralization of multiple levels of frequency at the heart of the American empire, like at the heart of the system of control that has spread around the whole planet. And we've seen these things occur all over the planet, around different cities, around different structures. Each one of those events, there's something that's happening extra dimensionally.
so what you're saying is that this is an important event. It's not simply the Washington Monument, the obelisk was hit by lightning. There's something more going on here, that we can take
Absolutely.
that as a sign that something is shifting.
Absolutely. It's there couldn't be a more perfect symbol, perhaps, to receive this kind of high frequency touchdown in order to shift the fields. There have been activities that have been taken by the Earth Alliance, as well as by our ET, our neighbors, our ET star being friends that are here supporting us. So there already have been actions taken to neutralize technologies that were employed through that monument, through that physical structure. This energy, that with this lightning striking, it seems to be more of an expression of higher dimensional energy that was clearing a frequency field from this world. And it wouldn't surprise if there are some other structures that perhaps receive the same treatment in the very near future. But it is an indicator, absolutely, that the fall of that cabal control structure is in process, and that, more importantly, that we, as the conscious human beings, these instruments of divine consciousness expressing in this world, that those control structures are now eradicated. So the artificial ceilings of suppression that have been put on us at a frequency level are now dismantled.
So with that in mind, that if we said it's an obelisk is a structure of energy, well, everything's energy, and it can be used for good or bad. So do you feel that what's actually happened? You said it's been neutralized, therefore is it neutralized in a way that it's been set back to the original intention, not specifically of the reason that was built, but the reason of obelisks, that the main intention is for good, for energy generation, for communication, for connection.
That absolutely feels to be true, regardless of whatever end event occurs with the structure. Like, let's say the Washington Monument in particular, that if this energetic occurrence comes through and clears that field and resets that field, like neutralizes that field, makes that field available to be utilized by consciousness, yes, there is a piece that is involved in that, and that would be regardless of any decision that would be made regarding the actual structure, which seems very likely actually that the structure may be torn down or dismantled in some way as we go through in the future. That may be the case as well with many other of these structures that are symbolic and actual physical seats of the control structure. Even though those buildings may change, it's the reversing of that inversion would be very important. And like, speaking of that inversion, the structures around all of these locations seem to be dialed in like as a resonance generator. Like at the Washington Monument, directly to the east of the Washington Monument, there is a building that is a Smithsonian building that's the Museum of African American History. But when you look at it, it is literally an inverted pyramid, a multiple step pyramid that is truncated as it moves towards the ground. So there are other structures that are involved in this matrix that are reinforcing that inversion. And that's not to say that the museum and anything like that is involved in this. It's about the actual physical structure generating energy. So these types of inversions are also all being neutralized. And as the people, like as we move through this awakening process, there will be a reclaiming of these ancient technologies, these ancient ways, a remembering of who we are and what our world truly can look like. And then many of these structures, I believe, will be dismantled, with new structures then rising up in their place in this rebirthing of our world into a new society, a galactic society, if you will.
So it sounds to me that if it's neutralized, then it's a little bit like, my laptop crashed last week, and it was actually a little component in the motherboard. But that small component in the motherboard affected everything, such that it wouldn't switch on at all. So could it be a little similar, that if that's neutralized, then the other buildings or spaces and places can no longer be activated? It's like the plug is pulled.
Absolutely. And in the case of the Washington Monument specifically, that appears to be the case energetically. This was, I mean, you look at the structure and how enormous it is. It
Yes.
is the linchpin of that entire design in a way. And so you're absolutely right. This is the South African researcher, Michael Tellinger, has done quite a bit of looking into the layout of these ancient structures, ancient temple sites, and how they correlate with what we see when we look at a motherboard, at a chipset, and inside of a computer, that the structures are all designed and they look almost identical. And this is exactly what is happening, that if you remove that keystone out of each one of these networks of control, then it just follows that the structure itself will cease its functioning in the way that it was intended.
Totally, the keystone. And you've also reminded me we should reach out to Michael Tellinger and ask him to come on and have another discussion about all these incredible buildings, and what really they were purposed for.
Absolutely.
Also, since you're in the US, I'm wondering if you have any connections in Washington, maybe people that you know who really felt something in terms of the energetics shift since that happened to the Washington Monument, since it was struck by lightning?
I don't have anybody that I've spoken to since this event happened, but I do know people that have visited Washington over the last several months. And Washington, it's very interesting. Washington has become a bit of a ghost town.
Hasn't it?
And there's no explanation for this that is out there into the public, and yet there are people, like there's a gentleman on Telegram that his Telegram channel is Richard Citizen Journalist, and he goes around. He lives in DC, and he's lived there for many years, and he drives all over. He'll take Ubers, he gets in his car, he walks, and he videotapes, he films on his phone, he films what's going on in DC. And I tell you, I don't know what the exact number is. I believe it's something like 700 or 800,000 in federal employees, something like that are working in and around Washington, D.C. And on any given day during the week at what would be rush hour, at like 4 p.m., 4:30 p.m., the city is practically a ghost town. So it's a very bizarre situation. The energy there has changed palpably in a very big way, and it feels like it's all being just kind of held in stasis in a way that is yet to be revealed why to us.
And as we come, speed towards the end of another month, it certainly seems that a lot has been happening this month. And although, people may not think things are shifting and changing, and you hear people talk about, oh well, we're getting used to the new normal. No, it's nothing normal. Or if people think there's nothing happening, there's a lot happening. And what you've just said, I actually do recall seeing another woman who often walks around some of these monuments and places in Washington with a video camera, and has seen the most extraordinary things. I remember one video where she just saw literally car after car after car leaving. And I'm not just talking about ordinary cars, I'm talking about from government buildings, just leaving, exiting, and just it went on for a long time. So there's definitely been a mass exodus. And I feel that we can take what happened at the Washington Monument being struck by lightning. Let's choose to take that, as you say, that something has shifted, something's been neutralized, and let's see if other similar buildings around the globe also go through something similar, maybe in the next week. So I think it's pertinent to keep our eyes open, aware, and awake.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. There in fact, there are some some channels again that I follow on Telegram that are talking about these types of changes, and there are like insiders, military intelligence insiders that share information, and they speak about openly. They're saying that there will be other buildings that are like struck down, or like, I forget their exact language, but they talk about these symbolic structures around the world being neutralized right now. So we will see, what's going to happen, whether that's dismantling of these very highly symbolic and functionally like energetic buildings, or if it's things like the Three Gorges Dam, or other things around the world. So it's going to be a very interesting ending to this month, I believe.
Yes, and just want to make it clear that although we focused on the Washington Monument, this huge obelisk, the other reason that you wanted to, that we focused on it was because you also have some insider intelligence from quite some time ago that has told you that it was used for nefarious purposes.
Yes, absolutely. The information that I'd received from my friend that is in military intelligence had confirmed to us multiple times that there have been other agendas with the utilization of this building, and that those purposes, have effectively been neutralized, by our so-called Earth Alliance, by the good guys that are helping to eradicate this control from our world. So good news.
Good news indeed, and a nice place to finish today. So once again, Matthew, I thank you for sharing your wisdom, your intelligence, your knowledge, and these insights for another interesting discussion, and look forward to speaking with you again next week.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carol.